really start. The reason that we wanted to visit about this is so many times after these big fires and different things that happen in our community, sometimes we don't come back and have a conversation about it. And I just felt after this summer and the summer before that this would be a really good summer to have a conversation about and look forward into the future of Lake County. And I think it's especially fitting that's in this building because when I was a kid, back in high school, my family and Mary Stabler's family wanted to buy the MC Ranch. And George Gillette was selling it, and the Nature Conservancy really wanted it. And it would have probably changed the way our county looks had the Nature Conservancy got it. I'm not saying anything negative about the Nature Conservancy. At that time, they were a much different organization than they are now. But I think having a Dell not in local control would have been Lake County would have looked much different today. But thankfully to the community, they rallied in this theater and said, the ranchers in Adel can pull this off, and we'd rather see them make a run at working the MC and making it work. And so that's one of the probably the most impactful community events that I've witnessed in Lake County, and I've witnessed a lot of really passionate people doing really passionate things. And so I'm going to start with all the bands. I'm going to start by introducing myself. I'm Richard Bradbury, and we ranch in Adel, Oregon. And I'm a real estate agent here at High Country, who was gracious enough to help host this event along with LCRI and Bradbury Ranches to have this conversation. And unfortunately, Nick Johnson, LCRI, he landed in Portland at about 9 o'clock and called me and said there was no way he was going to make it here. So you're going to have to listen to me all night. And I had some really clever things I was going to bug Nick about, but unfortunately we can't do that. And then the second question in the introduction I'm going to ask you guys is, what draws you to Lake County? What do you love about Lake County? And for me, I've been to Russia and I've been all across the country several times, and I had a 3-year-old, and the draw back to Lake County was immense for my family. And having come back and made adjustments to the pace of life here after being gone for a long time, I can tell you it was probably one of the best decisions I made. And in making that decision, I really have staked my future, my family's future, on what happens in this community in the future. And I would like to have my son grow up in a similar environment as I grew up in the 80s and 90s. And I see that's possible, and I don't think it's that far off. But I think that we as a community probably need to start managing our destiny a little bit more and start voicing what's important to us in Lake County and our natural resources going into the future. So I'll start with Barry, and if you want to introduce yourself and say what you love about Lake County.
All right, well, good evening. My name is Barry Schulberger. I'm the County Commissioner. What I love about Lake County is I was born and raised here. My family, obviously, I've had generations of family here in Lake County as well, on Barry's side and the Schulberger side. Just love all the rich tradition that Lake County brings, with ranching and timber and whatnot. And that's kind of been what I've been working with as a county commissioner, is trying to help those businesses and whatnot. Yeah, I grew up here. I grew up in the 80s and whatnot. Went to this theater as well. Really enjoyed everything about it. I had a 32-year career with the Forest Service. Got a job fighting fire, and it was a great job when I first started out. Paid for college, worked hard, loved it, loved the teamwork, things like that. The other things that I really enjoyed about the job that I got to do was prescribe fire, and I like to light a strip of fire and then turn around and see how it reacts, how you lit it and whatnot, and just see all the benefit that prescribed fire did 2 weeks, a month, throughout the whole summer, looking back at it and then look at it in the future seasons, to see the grass grow again, things like that. So I feel like with my career in the Forest Service, it helped improve forest health, and that was really something that I valued a lot.
Hello there, my name is Casey Johnson. I've lived here in Lakeview for about 6 or 7 years now, I'd say. I work with the Oregon Department of Forestry and do a lot of work with private landowners. I probably worked with some of you guys before in the past. I do a lot of forestry work. And I'd say part of what drew me to Lakeview and Lake County would be just the diversity of options between desert type country and timber country as well, and also the folks that kind of help make the county and the community what it is. I would say that there's probably something here for everybody, and I do think that's definitely something that we need in this area. So thanks you guys all for coming in.
Thanks, Casey. Hi, everybody. Thanks for having us here tonight. My name is Autumn Muir, and I am the uplands coordinator for the Lake County Umbrella Watershed Council. I've only been in Lake County for about 2 years, a little over, but I would say that, I guess, starting with a little bit of my background, so I grew up in Detroit, Michigan, which is really far away from here in a lot of different ways. But I never really felt at home there. I knew that that wasn't the place for me, which might break my mother's heart, so please don't tell her that I said that. But I've been looking for a place to call home for a long time, and I've been in Oregon for about 20 years, and I was in Burns for about 10 years, and really fell in love with this big open country. And what I would say is, I have a background in wildlife biology, and so I kind of gathered all my experience in that realm, and now I'm kind of more focused on like habitat and the uplands and the forest health, and I'm learning a ton, and my learning curve is still very steep. So I'm here to learn just as much as anybody. But the things that I like about Lake County are the wide open spaces, and not only the public land opportunities, but how wonderfully the private land has been preserved. We wouldn't have what we have if it weren't for the private landowners and the stewardship that they provide. And that was something that I had to learn like over time. It wasn't obvious to me. So I really just respect the folks here in Lake County and what we have and why we have it. And so this is where I choose to call home. I wasn't born here, I wasn't raised here, but I want to be here. And so that's, I guess, what I want to talk about me.
My name's Justin Farrell. My wife and I are cow-calf operators on a family, 4th-generation family ranch on her side. I'm not originally from here. Been here coming on 20 years now. What I like about Lake County is it's a great way and place to raise a family. It allows us the opportunities that we enjoy and opportunity for growth.
My name is Louise Linton. I ranch with my husband in Crooked Creek. We moved our ranch here right at 20 years ago from Central Oregon, pretty randomly, not a chosen location, but sort of a getaway, which worked out perfectly for both our children. Both went to high school and completed high school here. And actually, the ranch we're on was the first ranch we looked at, and so we just sort of jumped. But at this point in time, I'm sort of retired of everything. the cow herd's been kind of dispersed, so we still have the lands to manage. And most of my interests have been, improving, the land, which, has, for various reasons, lack of fire, I'm not gonna use that word, grazing practices. I think there was so much room for making it more productive. And we've worked. What I like Lake County is it seems like the agency people work together. Whether it be fish and wildlife, and I'm gonna forget somebody. The state forestry group, intergovernmental council, watershed council. Anyway, and Forest Service, believe it or not. Anyway, it's been a tremendous learning experience for me. I mean, I'm just a retired dog and pony doctor, and well, there's a couple right here. There's one in the dark over there. This mapping, Casey is just amazing. Autumn is sort of new to us, she's a replacement part, but as far as working with, improving the lands, and I know I've forgotten at least two. But anyway, my point is that the resources for improving the land, improving the capacity, improving the timber, improving the health, improving the range capacity, has been really fun.
So, like I said in the beginning, we want to keep this positive, but part of human relationships and human and interpersonal relationships is you gotta admit the bad stuff. And this has been a particularly bad summer, so I'm gonna go down with the pan and moist and talk about what's in their mind as the worst possible outcome, and then we'll bring it back around and start focusing on positive stuff. But I know that for myself, there's a lot of places that I knew as a child that are no longer here. And what my fear is that it's going to continue on and on. And pretty soon, I won't be able to recognize Lake County that I know and love. So with that, we're going to pandas and ask worst possible outcomes. If we don't, I'm not saying that we don't manage the forest, we don't work towards it, but we as a community don't make it more of a priority.
Well, I think obviously worst possible outcome is that we continue to have a year like 2021, where we have just massive wildfires and people chasing their tail and whatnot. I will say that it was very impressive. All the collaboration work that was done to help fight the fires. You see all the people that are working really hard, firefighters, the landowners, all the cooperator meetings, all the stakeholder meetings, those things like that. Those in the short term period were really good. But that's not where we want to be summer after summer after summer. And so, my role as a county commissioner, we need to support the federal agencies and the state agencies in restoring the landscape and, reducing fuels, doing prescribed fire, things like that, working across fence lines where we can get good work done, not just work that stops at a fence line. So those are the good things that I think are happening that people to the right of me are working really hard on. And Louise has good examples of that. So that's where worst possible outcome, we don't want to do that year after year. I know as a kid, I didn't hardly know anything about forest fires. And I know we had the Lost Fire in 1977 when I was a little kid. My parents took me down Highway 140 over by Lofton. And we could see a big glow up on the hill, and that was my whole experience with the big wildfire. I think that was about 30,000 acres total. That was huge, 20-some thousand acres. It was huge at the time. So you can see how things have evolved when we're talking about 500,000 acre fires. But today's kids that are growing up, they see smoke every day, and they don't even get to have the tool because their quality is so poor. So those are some of the things that we're dealing with.
I kind of definitely echo what Barry mentioned with just a repeat on this summer. That definitely would not look good for the county, and I think kind of to help hopefully prevent that from happening, I think one of the things that I've been most fearful of, or one of the biggest negatives, would be the loss of folks being willing to work together. I think that's been one of the best things. It's helped us maintain what we do have and helped to restore what we have lost, if you will, or things that have changed. But personally, I've been very fortunate to be in a position and work with a lot of different folks, and there's a lot of people that are very willing to work together and kind of have a different perspective than what they had going into things. And I think that, if the community, and obviously it starts with individuals, but as that gets lost, I think that's something that can be pretty detrimental to the community moving forward, regardless of if we continue to have fires or continue to be in drought conditions. But unfortunately, that's like the biggest negative I can see.
I have a million thoughts in my head, and I'm trying to figure out how to focus myself. But I guess, I agree that no one wants to see a repeat of not only last summer, but even the summer before. Mega fires in general are a new term. A mega fire is a fire that is over 100,000 acres. That never used to even be in our vocabulary. So I think it's important to address not only that people are really out there trying to do proactive treatments, but also we're not in the same book, we're not on the same page, we're completely off track of what previous administrators and the cooperators used to have to deal with. Like Barry says, 30,000 acres. We would love to have a 30,000 acre. Now, that's the change, the shift in the cultural acceptance of where we are at. I have worked on a ton of different collaboratives in Harney County, in Klamath and Lake County. There are a ton of people working towards proactive, ahead of the curve treatments and responses and not being reactive. So I don't want to miss that. We're not, Lake County, one of the reasons why I wanted to come to Lake County, in 2011 I acted as the Sage Grouse Coordinator for Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, and I had to work with the local implementation teams. And so lots of different counties all over the state, and Lake County was by far the gold standard. The natural resources community here communicated, collaborated, and were actually productive. So when this opportunity became available to me to move to Lake County, I was so excited. I was on board. This is where I want to be. This is where people put their bias aside. They can be transparent. They can be collaborative. And they can get work done. We are so far ahead of so many other counties, so many other places in the state. So I don't want to miss that. But worst outcome, it is tragic that we are dealing with the climatic changes and the fact that we aren't where we want to be, that we should have more pre-treatment thinnings, more fuels reduced, that we should have been doing prescribed fires, landscape scale, cross-jurisdictional boundaries decades ago. But we're doing the best we can now. We realize that. And I think what I would hate to see, I helped with the the county got a grant from the Department of Environmental Quality. We wrote a community response plan for our smoke-sensitive receptor area. It doesn't just impact livestock producers that smoke when we have a wildfire. Impacts all of our, elderly folks in town here, people with asthma, COPD. This impacts everyone. It's not just if you care about wildlife or if you're trying to, graze cattle or cut timber. It's people in town. It's everyone. So that is, to me, the worst case scenario. I just scattered a bunch of thoughts. I don't know if it was cohesive, but I think I just don't want to be reactive. I want to be proactive, and I think we're doing a really good job at that here in Lake County.
So I'll give you a very good example of the worst case scenario. And that's losing a big part of your cow herd in one season, the generational wealth of all the timberland you own, or your kids were gonna own. Losing 40+ miles of fencing that neighbors, a public landowner that doesn't recognize the value or the cooperation of that shared fencing that falls onto you. The streams and the water quality that we're dealing with right now, and the erosion from the uplands that come off of our public land neighbor. And I won't dwell on it too much because we could go on that for hours. But to Barry's point about raising kids and seeing fires when you were a kid, we are raising kids now. There's several of them here locally that one day help get cattle out of a fire to then turn around and watch their parents shoot the same cattle that they've raised and pulled calves out of as heifers. And that's the reality of what causes, or what happens in these scenarios.
I'm gonna get out of the county. What I see as the worst case scenario is our timber diverse biological lands turning into some of the landscapes that I've studied as ancient forests in China that are now barren, non-productive lands. So I guess I'm afraid we'll go the way China went. And that's not a racist or any kind of statement. It's just, that's a topography that I think has changed in the way that I see, this repeated catastrophic fire, taking the fertility out of the soil, that's a direction that you could end up with. So that's just my imagination with the worst case scenario. I also think that I've thought this for 20 years. We're next. Our ranch is next. And to keep up with, to try and keep ahead of it with the lack of fire for 100 years. And I see it, more than 100 now, I'm getting older. When I see it with these huge juniper trees that only ring out of just over 100 years, they've got 3/8 growth streams. That's a juniper that's, hasn't been killed naturally. It's been allowed to be there, and it's, sucked out of the watershed. We are lucky that in 2020, spring up, in 6 weeks we cut over 1,000 acres and hand-piled juniper that had been built up by fire suppression for over 100 years. And it was like a miracle to have that much done, But we're still sort of the next, and we've only got about half of that burned, and I wanted it all burned this year. But the snow came, which I will not criticize this stuff. So anyway, keeping ahead of the game, but my worst scenario is what I previously described as far as a real sterile natural resource.
So we'll just go by and we'll go down the line and talk about what we see as the best possible outcomes. What are some of the stuff we've learned from this year and years past that we can apply to make a better outcome for our natural resources in Lake County and the community of Lake County.
Best possible outcome, I got to sit in on the group that's Autumn's part of, that is working hard for bootleg. Many groups that are working together to see what they can do about fence lines, about salvage timber, getting to the mills, about erosion, some of those things that Justin talked about, so that we can make it better. And just seeing that many people all at the table trying to have good things happen and make things available for the people that need them, those critical resources and critical infrastructure work done. Those are good things. I think also, though, some of our senators and congressmen are really getting it on the west side of the United States, and they push for more money to go to the forests to do restoration work. And maybe Barry Elmer's going to talk about it, but they're going to really beef up the work that's going to be done as far as prescribed fire and things like that, and try to do more fuels reduction. So, yeah, we had to have multiple years of bad outcomes. But I think that we're going to really focus on trying to correct it. And it's never going to be perfect. It's always going to be an uphill climb. But at least we're making it an emphasis now. And I think that's super cool.
I'd say that probably looking ahead, what I would see as the best possible outcome would be that folks and just the community as a whole are able to take the negatives that we've experienced over the last couple of years, take the momentum that there is between folks being willing to work together, and maybe, look at that going into the future and see how we can do things proactively to make, beneficial use of our natural resources going forward. We have a lot of forest ground that's overstocked, and that definitely leads to a lot of the situations we've had with fires. And, unfortunately, I don't know too much about rangeland, but there are definitely aspects of rangeland that can be addressed similarly as well. I don't know where that stands, but if folks are able to take kind of these negatives, absorb those, and look at that, that's almost to me an opportunity to hit the reset button on things. Economically, it doesn't always pencil out to go out there and thin forest the way that you need to do it economically, and I'm sure it's the same with rangeland in similar aspects. But if we can all continue to work together and be proactive with things and take these negatives and try to turn them into positives and look ahead as to what we want in 100 years, knowing that it's going to take every year to get there, but in the end, for the third or fourth generation of folks that we have in the community now, that knowing that that's what we're managing this stuff for, and it's not necessarily for what we're going to get in our own lifetimes, but for the future generations, I think that's probably the best outcome that I can see, is really looking far ahead and trying to make sure that everything that we manage and the things that we touch related to natural resources are as resilient as they can be in regards to fire, but also drought. And what happens if things flip and all of a sudden we got a ton of rain instead of snow? And so how do we try to manage our lands to be versatile and be able to accept and take on those challenges and disturbances that are going to happen inevitably? We can do as much as we can to prevent that stuff, but it is going to happen. And so what can we do now and over the coming years to make that stuff try to withstand and be as resilient as possible? And I think, to me, that's definitely something that keeps me here and makes me motivated to go to work and continue doing stuff. And so looking ahead, that's what I see as our kind of best possible outcome.
I really don't want to follow that, but I will try. Really good job, Casey. Casey, and that's one of the great things about, I love the people that I work with, and we just build off of each other. I guess I was trying to prep my answer, but then I got so involved with what you were saying because it was so good. I think of it in a couple of different pieces. I think of, best case scenario in the proactive. So pre-treatment, juniper removal, conifer thinning, creating a resilient and healthy forest that can take some fire and make it through okay. Reducing those ladder fuels, but in a way that isn't all at once, that is patchy and staged and creates biodiversity and fringe and edge and wildlife habitat and grazing habitat and all of the things. I mean, we really have to think about so many variables when we're looking at this picture. And I also think about, we have so much money right now coming for this, and it is the best possible problem, but it still kind of is a problem. Like you said, Rich, the legislature is really taking notice because of these catastrophic fires that we've had, and there is more money, I think, being funneled towards restoration actions than possibly ever before. I'm not really sure, but what we need to do is stay focused, stay strategic, stay engaged in where we want to do our work, and hopefully bringing more money to our local economy, because they can throw all the money they want at us, but there's only so many hours in the day, there's only so many days that you can actually do this work with fire season and snow and all of this. So I think we have a really good plan of how to be proactive. And I think strategic thinning in not only the private land, but also in the public land, like I said again, cross-jurisdictional boundary, landscape scale, ridgetop to ridgetop restoration. With the follow-up plan of utilizing prescribed fire as a maintenance tool. We're going to do all of this effort. We need to maintain it. We don't want to be cutting junipers again in 20 years. We need to kind of have a cultural shift in how we look at fire. Right now, fire is a bad word. Wildfires are scary, but prescribed fires, controlled, is a good plan. Would you rather have the whole summer with smoky conditions, or would you rather have your shoulder seasons of spring and fall and know about it? We can let you know where the fire is going to be, how long it's going to be, and it's controlled. So that is what I think is the best case scenario for proactive. Additionally, realistically, there's the reactive portion. And again, we are getting a lot of funding from not only the legislature, but OWEB and other sources to respond to these wildfires, to help our private landowners out with fencing, with seeding, with spraying, with erosion control. So I think we're sitting as good as we can right now to be moving forward to reduce the impacts of wildfires, because they're going to keep coming, and then responding to the wildfires when they do come. And I think that there are resources and options for our private land owners and also the public landowners. So I'm gonna stop babbling.
So first I would thank Casey and Autumn for the kind of help that they provide to the private landowners following an event like this. From my standpoint, the best possible outcome is completely the opposite of 2021. To be completely blunt about it, I hope that my kids never own a piece of ground that neighbors a federal landowner who doesn't manage their own ground. That's what we have to deal with in the future. our private lands consistently, whether it be Lake County, Clinton County, Pawnee County, the West in general. Our private lands are in jeopardy from our federal neighbors, and they have burned us out to a point that it's hard to stay in business. So going forward, anything better than that is a positive.
I'll be positive.
That's good.
I'll be positive. When I wake up in the morning, I don't even have to pick up my head from my pillow. And I can look out all the way down Crooked Creek Valley, and I see where, speaking of a ridgetop to ridgetop, and landscape treatment, I see Bill Tracy's, I see a Cahill place, I see a former Melvin Dick, Brad Augustine, and the Taylor Ranch, which I know some of these people made them do it. Anyway, it's beautiful. And, to wake up to the sun coming out and showing on that. The other thing I'm positive about is that I think that our ranch was the first, at least in Lake County, to do an official prescribed burn. And I don't mean to be wrong on that, but this spring in May, and I worked with the Forest Service, 2 or 3 people there, the state foresters. And anyway, they came on a piece of ground that we'd been working on. The timber had been harvested. We'd gone back through and burned some of the timber debris, gone back a second time and taken out some more of the juniper, although that was done at the time. Anyway, it was a place that was ready for fire without being catastrophic. And they came and did that and did, a superb job, but I learned so much, about how it's done and the precautions to take, and this and that, and it was certainly, extremely well managed. So that, that would be my positive take. And we've not now got what I would say, okay, I won't say that. I was gonna say we've got the whole eastern part of our ranch somewhat protected, but there's some bad spots.
So and for the time, I'm gonna lump some questions together. But sitting here listening to you guys, one observation that I hear is, what I'd like to make is, the agencies are doing a lot of work, the private landowners, but Lakeview is greater than both those together. And Lake County is greater than both those together. So if you're talking at an every person level, because the entire Lake County economy is affected by what happens with our natural resources. And that was really a big point about tonight. All wealth is derived from the land and the sun. And if we aren't caring for that, I think that's what we're seeing in rural America. So we forgot that principle. So as we go forward, the next question I'm going to ask you is, what are some strategies and actions that everybody as a community can get into to make a different future? And what would your call to action be for people in the community? Where do you need help? How can the community help you? What can they do to help us build wealth back into our natural resources and back into our rural community?
Well, none of these are, a couple of things that come to mind to me are shattering, but not always popular either. But we have to have a tolerance for prescribed fire smoke. And I know we eat smoke in the summertime and nobody likes it, but you have to have a tolerance for prescribed fire smoke. And we're working pretty hard at, with our air quality group for Lakeview in particular, we're working towards having, making sure that we don't exceed those PM 2.5 levels and whatnot. But we have to have some level of saying, okay, there are going to be times where we're going to have smoke and it may affect people. And we need to give as much heads up as we can. We need to let people know that, yeah, this is going to last 3, 4, 5 days, but we're going to get a whole bunch of acres treated. And the key is that we're treating the right acres in the right places. And a lot of them are right next to private land, so that if we do have a wildfire, a large one, your land is easy to protect because we've got good fuel reduction treatments all around it. That's one thing. Second thing, drawing a blank what my second thing was. I'll pass and then maybe I'll come back.
We'll come back.
I'd say probably the biggest thing for me would be just for folks in the community to be willing to accept change. The community in the last 130 years has really gotten this community to where it is now. I spent a lot of time looking at old photos of Lakeview and Lake County, and that's one of the biggest things that's pretty surprising to me is there's a lot of photos that show I don't know how many feet of snow in the middle of town, but you go out right now and it's like, yeah, we got maybe half a foot, maybe we'll get a foot, and that's pretty awesome. But being willing to accept change and knowing that things are going to continue to change, and then managing or looking at the future from the same standpoint that we had in the past or what's gotten us to where we are now. It has gotten us there, but it might not be the most appropriate thing going forward, and I think that probably be the biggest thing that could help out myself and my position and my role and responsibilities, but also just the community in general, which is being willing to accept change and trying to understand that I really do think that everybody in the community is in this together to make Lake County better, and that sometimes it is a struggle to get there and it is kind of a fight to get there at times, but I do think that we're all in together and wanting Lake County to succeed, and sometimes that does involve change, and I think it's just important for folks sometimes to be able or willing to accept that.
Thank you. I guess I would echo some of the stuff that Barry talked about because we have worked together so closely on it. I think the Lake County Umbrella Watershed Council does a pretty good job of outreach and education to our producers, to our large landowners, because that's typically who we are working with. Where I think we have a little bit of a missing link is the community at large here, like within the city limits, let's say. And that was what was a really great opportunity, another huge learning curve for me to help develop that community response plan for the Lakeview sensitive smoke receptor area. We had a couple of HEPA filter giveaways, grant money where we were able to provide that to our vulnerable folks here in town. But yeah, again, and I guess I feel like I'm repeating myself a little bit, but I think it's important to say that we are at a stage here where there is a requirement for a change in culture. Wildfires are devastating, especially mega wildfires. Over 100,000 acres. We have the potential to truncate that a little bit if we can effectively treat our not only public land but also private land, again, across the fence. Wildfire doesn't know that fence line is where Forest Service goes to private land, and neither should we, right? We need to treat this landscape as if it were one ownership in a sense. And I think preparing the land to receive prescribed fire as a maintenance tool is what we need to kind of get across as an education and outreach opportunity for every individual in Lake County.
So I'm starting to think I was on the wrong panel here. which I don't disagree with anything you said. But from the community standpoint, from my involvement in the industry that I'm involved in, would be for people, whether it be Lakeview, Lake County, or outside of, to appreciate and understand where their food and fiber comes from. If we can get back to that point in time, I think that opens a lot of new doors and opportunities for everybody.
Thought so much about smoke dispersion. Maybe it's because I haven't paid too much attention to it. But we're in a sort of a separate valley where our smoke doesn't get counted. And so what I found is there's such a small window to get these lands prepared where you can have, just a low level prescribed fire that, you add in all these restrictions as far as smoke management at the time, and pretty soon it snows, which is wonderful. But we're back to, back to snow again. And frankly, on Monday, I sent a forest restoration crew clear back to Medford. They came on Monday morning and they went back Monday afternoon because, we were banking on maybe getting missed by the snow or something of that order. So, to add that addition, the smoke management's an issue. And I'm kind of spoiled, I just burn. And it doesn't, we all know in that valley that, when he's burning, it's gonna sometimes be bad, and when they're burning, it's gonna sometimes be bad. And we haven't got too much over regulation. But I think I'll just stop there as far as that goes.
I'll just, a couple things though that do concern me. One is more regulation. The example would be Senator White's River Democracy Act, where he wants to restrict timber activity half mile on each side of every stream and river that they've identified in Lake County, which is 29 different segments in Lake County of different streams and rivers and whatnot. And that's not going to work for us. We know that these wildfires are using these rivers and streams as their chimney to burn. And you see it as the most intense areas where things are getting wiped out. So that is a big concern. Second thing is that when you change administrations and whatnot, you change funding. And by the time some of these federal agencies get their folks built up to do the work, somebody's going to have another idea. And they're going to, the fear is that it will get cut and then you're back to the bare bones again. So those are concerns that I have.
Question.
Can we,
Just-
go ahead.
Do you think if there were, I listen, both of you guys are giving me an idea. So there's the idea of having built-in cooperatives. Would that help the whole funding and get it done thing, rather than thinking that each project is this island? The ongoing, you're talking about the ongoing. Would the nature of having broad-scale cooperatives, that be something that would help out? Yeah, go ahead.
I'm gonna tack on to that, because I'm gonna put my rancher hat on, take my facilitating hat on. And when I hear prescribed burns as the answer, my question is, economically, how is that helping the community? It does, and that's where I think that, and I don't mean to take away from your questions, but is there a role for a greater dialogue in a cooperative situation where we can ask these questions, like about these kind of things, like Louise didn't know about smoke, that kind of stuff? Go ahead.
Okay, so to answer your question, yes. So right now, or for a while, the Lake County Umbrella Watershed Council has been around for a few decades now. the Klamath Lake Forest Health Partnership, that we attend monthly meetings and we have multiple subcommittees. That is a collaborative, that is a partnership where we meet and exchange ideas, and because of that collaborative, that is the way that we can leverage our grant opportunities. Using all of those partners, the core partners and the additional partners, and all of the different technical expertise that everyone brings to the table, absolutely strengthens our opportunity to get the job done, to address issues that are not only active right now, but future planning. I think that is honestly one of the reasons why the Lake County Umbrella Watershed Council is so successful in our grant applications with OWEB and Resource Advisory Council and BLM. We have a proven track record of communicating and collaborating, and because of that, we get the work done. And I think that's a piece that is forgotten often, that there is a ton there's a ton of work that we can point to. There are acreage calculations, there are monetary values in the millions that have been dedicated to Lake County. So this isn't, this panel isn't here to say, what should we do? We don't know what to do. It's, we're doing a good job and we're gonna keep doing it and we need more. And then, what was your question? Sorry. Oh, economically, prescribed fire, economically, yes. Prescribed fire is of utmost importance economically, because would you rather see money be drained in fire suppression, or would you rather have fire and not have the fire happen at all? And so with the pre-treatment of the forest thinning and reducing the ladder fuels and preparing the landscape to accept fire would reduce the intensity and the severity of wildfires, maintain that with prescribed fire, reduce the smoke impacts to the community, all summer long, and basically reduce our suppression costs to wildfire, proactive versus reactive. I think it's super important.
Challenge you and say that is a piece of a whole and then not a very holistic approach.
Well, the piece that we're addressing tonight is forests and communities. And I think treating our forests and preparing it for wildfire and maintaining it with prescribed fire is maybe the most important piece right now.
Anybody else have any
We got involved in this sort of tree farmer outfit, and interviewed, et cetera, et cetera. I guess my deal is, I'm not a tree farmer, I'm a rancher, and that may be an identity crisis, but, what I see as far as benefiting the community is, and here again, I'm not bragging, but we've been going through some pretty dry times, and our ranch has still held capacity and increased, so that's money for somebody. I'll spend money down on East Street, if I'm able to run more cows. So, as far as the watershed goes, I didn't mention that while I'm got my head on the pillow, I don't see all the improvements that have been made in some of the creek restoration and, the watershed portion. I do see a big hill that they won't let us even breathe on, because it runs along a ditch, so that's forbidden for logging. And if I could only have a match, there's every ugly tree on that ditch that I could find. And it's because they've been protected. And I'm not sure that I'm getting too far out. I'm not sure that their epigenetics aren't going to catch on some of my neighboring trees. but we won't go there. Anyhow, as far as the community goes, we've done some very, 2 different logging projects over the 20 years. And there's money in a lot of people's pockets. So we've got grass and trees and cows and wildlife. I forgot the water. But anyway, as far as a benefit to the community, that's, I think, keeping the mill going, keeping,
I'm sorry, can I expand upon this?
Can we finish, we're gonna finish this panel. I got one more question to ask the panelists, and then, I'm sure they're all gonna hang around and we can visit about it later. But I wanna stay on track and let everybody out that came here let our panelists speak. And I'm sorry, the questions, I just don't wanna get too far off topic. I appreciate it though. So, wrap this one up. Say we accomplished all our goals. We're grandparents, and we're looking back at what we accomplished. And what does that future look like for you?
Well, let's be honest, we're never gonna accomplish all our goals. I think there's like close to 860,000 acres of the Fremont-Wenema National Forest in Lake County. And a lot of that is areas that is never gonna be logged. It's never gonna have prescribed fire on it because of topography, inability to have any type of control to it or things like that. So there's always going to be fire. I think what the key is, though, is you kind of look back, what many people talk about with the cohesive strategy. Let's try to have a resilient landscape. Let's work on our water. Let's protect our water that's out there, and do prescribed fire where we can, thin where we can. That makes sense. Let's respond to these wildfires the very best we can with the most resources we can, keep them small, and then let's do some good work around where we are. We do have homes in our urban interface. Those are the 3 things that we can focus on.
Thank you. I'd say that, if we are able to achieve a lot of our goals, probably, as Barry mentioned, not very feasible to achieve everything, but if we're able to get a lot of the things crossed off the list, I think the best possible outcome would just be, again, kind of going back to the resilience of the community, where regardless of what happens, be it drought, flooding, erosion, fire, heat, waves, whatever, that we're able to kind of absorb that and continue to move on without, giant losses to productivity and the economy and just the natural systems themselves. So I'd say that my best case scenario would just be increased resiliency of Lake County and what it has to offer.
Thanks. I think my best case scenario is that, when I'm a grandma, that our way of life is as similar to today as it is, adaptive management and changing to your circumstances. That's all relevant. We have to evolve. But I would love to live in the same house in 50 years with the same view, and the same way of life that we all appreciate and love so much about Lake County. So I think, not panicking and stressing and freaking out about not 1 but 2 wildfires within, a mile of my home, and evacuating and not evacuating and all that. I don't want that to be the new normal. I want to prepare. I want to do what we can with the funding that's available to make our forests as resilient and prepared for a wildfire fire is natural, it's okay, it just shouldn't be 90,000 acres in 3 days, okay? Small, mosaic, patchy fire, prescribed fire. I want to evolve and adapt, but I really want things to stay the way they are, minus mega fires.
For me as a grandparent, potential grandparent, it would be to see our grandkids be able to own the same land that we do now, the 5th and 6th and 7th generation, be able to see a green tree on the landscape again, which is gonna be a long, long time from now in our situation. To be able to take our grandkids back to what were up until September of this year, several old homesteads that my wife's family was raised in that are now nothing but a few rocks that were the foundation. So I'm hopeful we can build something going on in the future and be able to pass something on.
I think I'll just second it.
So one of my mentors always wanted to make sure that everybody that's a panelist gets honored, and I have to thank you guys for making the time to come out here on this snowy day and really being candid and transparent with us and answering some tough questions and having a tough conversation. So I really appreciate that, but I'm gonna let her go ahead and honor you guys for your participation. You want to stand up and introduce yourself?
Hi, I am Gina Farrell, and I'm a rancher. I happen to be Justin's wife. I wanted to say you guys did a really good job up there, and I really respect you for getting up there and in front of all these people. It's been a really tough year, and it's been pretty challenging. And to be able to get up there and speak about it is tremendous, and I applaud you guys for that. I also wanted to add on to the talk about the benefit of the community, the benefit to the community from managing lands. And I think Greenville is a perfect example of that. If these lands aren't managed, the town, that town, the majority of that town burned. And I'm not saying that would happen here, but I'm saying that's a pretty good example of management. And I also think that there's a lot of these guys have talked about a lot of good work that has happened on private land, and there has been some really good work. I don't want to discount that that's happened with Forest Service and BLM both, but those are the majority landowners in Lee County, and I think a lot of emphasis needs to be put on those lands to be managed. I guess in the light of this last year, I just have to personally say the Forest Service, because our private land has been logged, has been grazed, has been thinned, and the Cougar Peak fire wiped it out. So we put effort out, and without the cooperation of adjacent landowners, it really was, I'm not going to say pointless, but it didn't help us. So I'm not going to say that would happen in every situation, but I guess that's what happened in our situation. So I just encourage everybody to think about that, I guess, when you're voting, and encourage your public sector to really promote land management. Thank you, guys.
Wait, can you go ahead and get a round of applause for our panelists, please? Did Mark Albertson make it today?
Yeah, he's fighting back there.
Oh, right on. You want to come up here? I invited Mark to do the pledge and prayer, and I got so busy at the beginning that I thought we'll just do it right now, and then we'll bring on Barry.
Okay.
You good with that, Mark?
I'm good with that.
We'll get the flag and I'll play you flag when they're not. If you want to do the prayer, first introduce yourself and tell us something about this county.
I'm Mark Galveston, I'm one of the county commissioners. And what I love about Lake County. My family moved here to Lake County in 1908. Homesteaded in Yoakum Valley. We still have that ranch, so we're a century old. My great grandfather came in 1859 and homesteaded in Mandan. He was a shipbuilder, and when he passed away, the rest of the family moved here. My great grandmother was actually an accountant. And he met her down in California. They moved to Mandan, and then he passed away. He was a shipbuilder. He passed away from lead poisoning from the ship's paint. But then the rest of my family moved here, all in wagons, and moved their livestock at the same time. So we have a great heritage here. I'm gonna say one quick thing too, that you don't get mad at me, but I know this was a hell of a year for all of us. But our local Fed guys busted their tails to try to help. It's above their level, and so that we really need to focus on. We need to work, it's gonna cost us some money to hire lobbyists and talk to our congressmen and our representatives and our senators. Because it's a law that our federal employees, some of which are here, they can't lobby for us. It's against their rules. And so the rules need to be changed, because I know that they really want to help us. Our family went through the Berry Point fire. It was a terrible deal. And so I take things a little personal, but I do want to thank those guys and the Klamath Lake Partnership and the Watershed Council and everybody that's trying to work, but we have to work together. And that is the only way we're going to change where we're at. We have to go higher than Mr. Muir and Mr. Forbes. We have to, we got to take it to Washington, D.C. and change things there. And I guess that's all I have to say about that. So we'll go ahead. You want to pray first or the pledge first? Okay, you're tall enough to hunt ducks with a rake. You could be a flagpole holder. So if you guys will stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So you might as well keep standing. Plus I just wanted to watch Dick sit down and stand back. So another big point, the only way we're going to get there is by our faith. Our Pledge of Allegiance mentions God. As you guys know, it's the only way. And the Bible tells us the prayers of the righteous man availeth much. And so Abraham was righteous because he believed God. It's easy for us to believe in God. But sometimes we don't always believe God. And so when we pray, let's pray in faith, and let's do that right now. Father God, I just ask a blessing on tonight. I ask a blessing on everybody that's here, our panelists, our federal partners, and all the ranchers and the people that have made a lifelong sacrifice to make Lake County a better place. Father God, we believe you. We thank you for the snow out on the ground. And I ask that you just protect us from the fire, protect us from drought, protect us from anything that the evil one might have for us. Father, I believe that we can overcome this. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Mark. And Barry was very gracious to say that he come and give us a sort of a look into the future and talk about the forest. And I want to say thank you very much for that. I asked him if he wanted a presentation, if he had a PowerPoint slide or something, and he said he was going to do it old school. So I'm just going to turn the mic over to him, and thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. Let's see if I can find a spot where I should read minutes. So I said, thank you, excuse me. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you, everybody who's here. Excuse me, in the panels. It's a pleasure to be here. It's a pleasure to have the opportunity to listen to what people have to say.
We can't hear you.
You need to put the microphone closer. Barry, you need to put it closer to your mouth.
Okay. So it's a pleasure to be here. It's a pleasure to be able to listen to folks and hear what they have to say. Particularly for me, these last few years, 2 years more or less, I've been restricted from being able to talk to folks. I probably shouldn't be here tonight. I'm sure if the wrong person sees a video of this, I'll be getting a phone call. So, still, I thought it was important. So, give you a little bit of introduction to who I am. I am the forest supervisor for Wyoming National Forest. I'm also a resident of the county. So to hear what folks have to say is important to me. Rich, if I drop this thing, because I probably will do it. So I have an interest in what people are saying. I'm interested in everything that's been discussed this evening. I've been here for 5 years. As you said, I said the last 2. I've been about 30 years with the Forest Service. Most of that time spent working with the livestock industry in rangeland management. I've been to, I can't believe the places I've lived. I've been in a lot of rural areas, urban areas, everything in between. I've lived in some counties where, in this country, where we think we're a third world country. I've lived and worked on the Mexican border, and I got to spend a decade in DC. Not necessarily a highlight. But along those lines, I also admit that I was born in DC already. My family's 7th generation on this continent. We were here before the country was formed. We have a signer of the Declaration of Independence, one of my ancestors. I also have a bunch of ancestors that were part of the first anti-tax movement, the Whiskey Rebellion. So there's a bit of rebellion there against some authority. It's in my blood, sometimes gets me in trouble. So I want to focus primarily on Fremont Wynema lands in the county and county lands in general for a little bit. Barry was pretty close on his estimate. I had some folks run some numbers. There are 853,000 acres of Forest Service administered lands that are part of Fremont Wyoming National Forest in this county. I did not include, I told no one to include the chutes, that's part of it as far as I'm concerned. Don't include anything else that might be in the county, but what do we have as far as Fremont Wyoming lands in here? That's roughly 16% of the land base for this county. Depending on who you are, that may be a big amount, that may be a small amount. But I thought it was important for folks to hear that and have that information. I'll talk a little bit about impacts from large fires in the county and particularly in Fremont, Wyoming, I can't get it out tonight. The freeway, I'll go with that, that's easy for me. You know, over the last 10 years, large fires that are greater than 1,000 acres, there have been 469,000 acres impacted by fire in this county. That's 469,000 unique acres. I told folks, if something burned up 2 or 3 times, I didn't want to count it 2 or 3 times. Let's count it once and see how many acres have actually been impacted by fire, large fires in this county in the last 10 years. 253,000 of those acres were in the Fremont Wyoming National Forest. Roughly 30% of the forest acreage in this county has been impacted by a large fire in the last 10 years. We did half of that last year, or this year. I got not 21 yet. 227,000 acres in the county in this last year. 136,000 of that was on the Fremont Wyoming. Roughly 16% of the acreage that we manage in this county. There were major industries impacted. When I look at the county, what I view as major industries. The timber industry. Bootleg fire, burned trees are already unmerchantable because of the time of the fire. Still growing in the year, the trees were growing in such a way that so much sap was running. Those burned trees became unmerchantable as lumber within 4 months. We're making other options available. We've talked to some of the mills, we've talked to the folks dealing with pellets, dealing with chips. We're still able to move material. We're finding other ways to move material, to do something within them salvage, without calling it salvage. I think anybody has any kind of sensitivity to political words, you can call things salvage, and suddenly people will shut us down. We can't afford to go there. However, we burned so many trees this year, we're approaching the point where the market's saturated. I know there are a lot of folks who like to see us do more salvage, they'd like to see more trees disappear. When those burned trees disappear, the mills don't have the capacity. We started talking to the mills August 3rd. While bootleg was still roaring, what could they take in black, what did they need in green, how can we work with them? We thought we had a plan, and then we had 2 more big fires. Didn't blow the plan up, but it sure made us change and reconsider. We're still trying to move forward with the industry. There was a lot of private timber lost. Collins, and I'm still trying to stick to Lake County. Collins Mine had 25,000 acres burned up. Their estimate last time they talked to me was 80 million board feet. That's all going to their mill. Plus, they're trying to help out private landowners, they're trying to help us out. My understanding is they're shipping logs to other mills. They're shipping things to John Day. They're shipping things to Gilchrist. Trying to help us get the land, trying to set us up to be able to reforest, to do some restoration work, coast-guard restoration work. And of course, there's going to be potential impacts to Collins Mill. We need to re-examine our plans on Fremont Wyoming, what we're going to do, how we're going to do it, to keep the mill operating. We're working with Collins on that. perhaps one of the things that is mitigating, moderating, whatever you want to call it, a lot of the impacts from fires regarding the mill is the fact that a few years ago, in cooperation with Collins corporate leadership, we went to DC and asked them to dissolve the sustained union. I know there will be some people maybe a little concerned about that, maybe upset about it. That may end up being the salvation of the mill. While that unit existed, Collins was not permitted to buy anything from Monmouth National Forest. Now that the unit is gone, they can buy timber from MoDOT. I can tell you, if you drive around the Warners on the California side, they've got a lot more timber, a lot more accessible, a lot closer to the mill than anything we had on the forest pre-fire, and definitely anything that we have right now. So I'm working with the mill, or with the MoDOT, trying to make things happen. The livestock industry. I know I've got some letters from some folks that asked some questions. I'm trying to get back to you as quick as I can. I've talked to my staff, I've given them the messages to deliver. Getting into specifics. The gist of what we know at this point. The totality of the impacts to the grazing industry, the livestock industry, we don't know what that looks like right now. We may not know in the spring and summer. We know there was forage burned, we know there was infrastructure, primary fences burned up, some of them by the fire, some of the damage happened when we were trying to put the fires out. We know we need to take care of that. We know we're probably going to adjust some grazing seasons this year on the forest. We don't know what that looks like yet either. The recreation industry. We know we have facilities damaged. We have roads and trails that are damaged and are unsafe right now. So we've got some things to move forward. We think we're pretty idea of how things look out there. We'll see how quickly we can restore things to the maximum extent possible. So I think what you really asked me to talk about was moving forward. Where are we going from here? What are some things we see happening? What are some things I'm trying to get movement on? So some short-term things. Post-fire work. There are closure orders in place. I'm sure a number of you have been inside the fire perimeter for a legitimate reason, I guess, to look. Fully understand that, fully understand the interests, fully understand the concerns. But the closure orders are there right now. The lands within the closure, within the fire perimeter, and the Forest Service roads are officially closed. There are exemptions. Private landowners, if you've got land inside there, we're not going to stop you on your land. If you're a tenant on somebody's private land, we're not going to stop you on those roads. And of course, we have our fire personnel, some of our contractors in there as we try to get some of this work done, post-fire work accomplished. And anybody with a permit. I do plan on lifting those closure orders as soon as I know the major roads are safe. And by the major roads, we'll concentrate on anything that is rated for a passenger vehicle, and some of the high clearance roads that we know are needed to get to specific parts of the forest to do specific things. We've identified them. We're working on them. We have three kinds of work. We'll say three funding sources, basically, for post-fire work. One is suppression repair. If we damaged it while we were fighting the fire, it gets fixed as part of the fire cost. We're working on those. We've got a lot of that done. That's still, a lot of it will not be done by the time we lift the closure work. It's going to take us a while to reduce some of those roads and take care of some of the structures. We have what's called barrier, burned area emergency response. That's to address the things that are damaged by the fire itself that cause an immediate concern for human life, safety, and property. We only have a year to spend that money. We're working on it. We've identified what needs to be done, and we're working on it. And then within the last couple of years, there's something developed called Bear Pilot that's come out of our Washington office. That's for all the other infrastructure stuff. It's not covered by Bear. It's not an immediate health and safety issue, but it's something that needs to be fixed. Problem is, we have 1 year to get that work done too. It's time to call the fire contained. We're working on it. We did arrange to have some special assistants sent down. We have a couple of folks that's all they do is try to coordinate everything we're doing post-fire. On that infrastructure, minor infrastructure, Bear Pilot stuff, that covers our roads, our toilets, anything else that might have burned up that isn't all recovered. What we run into is per our Washington office policy, it does not cover reconstruction of livestock fencing. I can buy materials with that money, but I can't pay a contractor to put this material, to use the materials to rebuild the fences. We're working, through some folks like Commissioner Schulenberg and some others. Senator Merkley found out about this, especially when somehow or another a fire in Arizona last week in the newspaper where they are allowed to spend that money to rebuild their fences. And we want to know why. Why we were told no, they were told yes. We're talking about $3 million for construction. I don't think it's fair, and my boss doesn't think it's fair, especially after a large fire, that we can provide the materials, but we can expect the ranchers to make the contribution to put the fences up on Forest Service lands. We don't agree with it, we're working on it, and the regional forester has agreed with me that he will find the funding to get that contract work done. We don't know where it's going to come from, they're looking hard. We think we've got it. But we have another problem with fences. Rapid fire last year, we ordered fencing material in March, it did not show up till late November. We've already been warned by our suppliers, the amount of fencing we want, the amount of fencing needed across the country, it's going to be hard to get. And we're running out of contractors. We can't find contractors, we're finding contractors to build the fences. So I have to look at some other options and I'll get those fences back up. So a little bit more on the short term, the timber industry. And so we already mentioned, we met with the industry in August. We are working with Collins Pine, their corporate leadership, regarding some plan for some long-term sustainability for the mill. They don't want to see it go away. We don't want to see it go away. We're going to find a way to keep it open. I don't think it's a very hard lift. I think it's going to require some change in how we do things. It's going to require some change in how we do things as an agency. We're talking across 2 different regions, 2 different states, 2 different forests, how do things happen. And it's potentially going to require Collins Pine to make some changes in how they do business. Their corporate leadership understands that. None of us can continue on the way we have been if we want to keep that mill open. But we will keep it open. If it closes, it's not going to be because of lack of material from the Forest Service. We've got a lot of restoration work that needs to occur. We're working with partners, we're working with more partners. As the US collaboratives, whatever else, they're in place. They've been around for a long time. That's one of the ways we get all the money we do and get some of the work done that we do, the amount of work we get done. We lead the nation in many ways of the amount of work we get done on this forest. Those folks can help us with the planning and the funding. Reforestation is going to look different than it has been in the past. There's going to be a focus on restoration objectives. What are the areas where we have the highest probability of success? What do we want our fuels management to look like? You're probably not going to see production agriculture style plantations where we plant rows of trees and we do the same thing you do in your garden. We go back through and weed them out. We thin them out. If the objective is to have 25, 30 trees per acre, large trees per acre, 50, 60 years from now, we're not gonna plant 500 to 1,000 per acre. We're gonna plant what we think will get us to where we want to be eventually in the future. If everything we plant doesn't grow, if what we get isn't, after the first few years, first 10, 15 years, whatever people look at as a cycle, and we think we need to do another planting to get some diversity in each class, we're gonna do it. That's part of the plan, that's part of what we're working with. American Forest Foundation is working with us to try to make this happen, along with the industry, the timber industry. I'll circle back short-term in the livestock industry. We developed a decision key to help our folks determine the ability to graze next season. Now, those decisions are going to be made at the largest level they're going to be made as a pasture level. We expect them to be potentially made at a smaller level, more local level, site-specific, by the local rangers. It's not going to be anybody in my office making those decisions. The decision key is an analysis tool. It's not going to determine the actions. And the rangers have full flexibility to work with the permit holders to make adjustments, come up with ways to mitigate. What are some things we can do to keep folks on the ground to the maximum extent possible? Because our goal is to minimize further negative impacts to the ranching operations. As far as recreation and the other infrastructure, we're developing plans, contracts, agreements, trying to get everything we can in place now, so that when this huge flush of money shows up in the next few months, we can get those contracts issued, we can get the agreements, get that money moving, and we can start getting the work done as soon as we can get access because of the weather. From a larger scale, we're going to have to revisit our 5-year plans, both what we're going to plan and what we're going to do. 2 years worth of our scheduled planning areas out of the next 5 got burned up in these fires this year. So we're going to go back with the collaboratives, with our partners, and take another look at things. We're going to reorganize. Move on to some of the long-term things. That list isn't nearly as long at the moment. We need to continue the fuel stream work on the forest. And this one is strict on the forest. I'll talk about some of the other things in a minute. Fuel treatment work on this forest over the last 10 years, we treated 119,000 acres within this county, 14% of what we manage. We did thinning on over 71,000 acres. We prescribed burning another 36,000. And there's 12,000 acres we did both. That's a number I really think we need to increase. And that's based on lesson learned from some things we saw in Wood Lake and Cougar. One of our key projects that's been going on in this county is the Lakeview, I always mess up the name, I always use the initials, Lakeview Stewardship Collaborative Forest Restoration Project. It was a 10-year project funded in 2012. We received $2 to $4 million per year to complete that project. We got word that it's been approved for another 10-year extension. That's unheard of. And it's because of the amount of work and cooperation that people accomplish in this county, not the forest, as our neighbors. And for all that work we got done, nature showed us this year that even though we're leading the nation getting work done, we're not doing enough, we're not doing it fast enough. We're going to have to figure out how to pick up the pace. Additional parts of that long-term strategy, we need to implement those supervised 5-year plans. We need to make things happen. We need to keep going. We need to keep using NEPA efficiencies. And NEPA is a 4-letter word to a lot of folks, not an acronym. On this forest, we're setting the pace for the nation on how we simplify and develop efficiencies in NEPA. Last year, we signed 19 decisions. The average time from start to finish of the analysis was 101 days. Not 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, or 5 years, 101 days from start to finish. We found ways to make people work for us and get work done on the ground. We're also implementing forest products modernization. We're leading the nation in that. New ways of doing business as an agency. How do we simplify things? How do we streamline things? How do we help the industry do what they need done? Another major portion of our long term is we're going to have to increase our cross-border vegetation management. Again, we're setting the pace on a lot of things, but we found out this year we're not moving fast enough and far enough. People are going to wonder about the funding. I don't see the funding as an issue at this point. We are probably going to have more money flowing in our direction than we're going to be able to handle. We're talking billions of dollars, perhaps tens of billions of dollars from a couple of different funds. And we've been told that we're not going to hire a lot of extra people. We're going to hire some people to manage contracts and agreements and rely on others to help us get the work done. And part of that goes back to what Barry Schulberger said a little while ago. Administrations change, money disappears. And the chief of the Forest Service has said, we're not going to hire a bunch of people to turn our land off again. We're just not going there. We're going to have to change the way we're doing business. We have disaster recovery funds that were approved with the first continuing resolution in September. I can tell you right now, based on normal government bureaucracy, I still haven't seen the money. We finally found out how much we're going to get, we think, as a region last week. We have infrastructure funds, hundreds of millions of dollars, in fact, it moves more into the B category, billions of dollars, coming to the Forest Service. A lot of that is going to be targeted for this area, for this region, from California, Oregon to Washington. We know it's coming. They're still trying to figure out how much they'll send our way. And then the ever popular Building Back Better bill that just keeps floating its way through Congress. I don't know where it'll end up, but there's a pretty good chance wherever it ends up, we'll end up with more money. Short term, long term, anywhere we go, partnerships are going to continue to be a major part of what we do and how we get business done. This forest, this community, this county has a history of collaborative work among partners to get things done. Lakeview Stewardship Group's been around since 1998. I believe LCRI is kind of an offshoot of that, as far as the 503C. That group has accomplished enough work early on and continuously that they received national recognition in 2014 for all the work that was getting done. All the collaborations occurring. We heard about Klamath Lake Forest Health Partnership a little while ago. They were formed in '93. In 2020, they were recognized by the Oregon State Extension Service, the leadership of the Forest Service, and the leadership of the Department of Agriculture, USDA, for the amount of work and cooperation that was occurring and the amount of good things that were happening out here. So we've got the history, we've got the track record. I think you heard that earlier. Some partnership accomplishments. And these are cross-boundary projects in Lake County. We've got a lot of others going on across the forest. The Northward Project. So Jim Walls earlier, Jim was part of getting that one moving. And we received money, we received national recognition from the Natural Resources Conservation Service and the Forest Service. We received grants, both Joint Chiefs grants. We've received money from OWED, the Oregon Watershed Enhancement Board. We're getting grants from them. Thomas Creek Project started in 2020. Approximately 240,000 acres joint ownership. Again, funded by Joint Chiefs and OWED grants. So far, those two projects, and this doesn't, some places it sounds like a lot, some places it doesn't. We've accomplished treatment work on 23,000 private acres and 19,000 adjoining federal acres, Forest Service acres. The work's happening. Again, not as fast as it needs to, not as fast as we'd like it to, definitely not as fast as folks in this room would like to see it happen. Our next project is South Warner. Now that everything was from Highway 140 south to the California line. Extension service and some other folks will start doing private land work on that private land mapping this coming summer, so we can continue the cross-boundary work. So a few closing comments, as I think about some of the things we're going through today. The reality is, and I've got closing comments here, I think there's a lot of lessons learned in this last 2 or 3 years of fires. We're gonna have to adapt based on what we learned. There have been a lot of impacts that were catastrophic. We're gonna have to be able to figure out how to adjust to those. How do we help the community? How do we work together as a community, as a county, to make things happen? So now, and some of you have talked about some of this, I can go on for hours about some of the things we've learned, some of the things we need to do. Some of the good things we saw from fires like Woodward. There actually were some good things we learned from that fire that we move forward with. So some real quick closing thoughts. We need to continue working across boundaries to restore the health of our forests and watersheds, sharing stewardship of the lands. We all participated in creating the current conditions. When I'm looking at forest fuel conditions, unless I've got a map, or I can see one of those black and yellow property boundary signs, I generally can't tell the difference between the Forest Service administered land and the private land. The fuels conditions look the same in most of the county. I know there's some landowners that have done a lot of work. I know there's some places we've fallen down. I know there's some places the private landowners have fallen down. We need to start working together and ignore the boundaries. It all looks the same. It's all about the same. We all need to be harvesting timber. We need to be thinning the non-commercial timber, the non-commercial vegetation up there. And we need to follow the prescribed burning. One of the lessons we learned looking at bootleg is those areas where we did thinning, the no prescribed burning, they did better than the areas we did nothing, but they didn't look nearly as good as the areas where we called in with the prescribed fire, clean up our mess after we did not thinning. We need to do the whole thing, start to finish. And, as I heard somebody else say on the panel, we've got to do these things across boundary lines. Fire doesn't recognize property lines. We need to start paying a little attention to how we're doing our work. And with that, I can't even see back there, Rich. I think
I'm ready.
okay.
You gotta stay up there though. I'm gonna
I had a
ask,
feeling.
I'm gonna ask Jim Walsh
I'm getting used to being on the hot seat.
to honor you, and I appreciate you going old school. So I thought it was really informative and very honest, and I appreciate that.
Well, Barry, we've done a lot of work over the years with the stewardship group, and we move forward and learn from this, and for you to know that you've learned too, and that we're going to work together. We thank you much for that. We really do, because it's going to take all that to make things different here, and we thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
All right, we'll take a quick 5-minute break and then set up the next panel. If you're on the panel, if you want to join me on the stage here sooner than later, that'd be great. Thank you.
I'm feeling good too. Very good, excellent. Yeah. If I could just get her to retire now, we could have fun together.
She's good. Pretty close.
Yeah.
We're just waiting for Briggs to get the license. This deadline is September for the nursing board to petition for the hours. This master's degree, they have 3 years to do. They have to have 3 years in the post program. So he was set before the board. He had COVID. He was sick for months. I had 2, but he had the long COVID. Yeah. So he was sick before the board on February 20th. So March 1 is already. That's not too far.
No, not much we can do during the winter, so someone's.
I'll go make some money.
Is it still selling?
Yes.
Well, it's so bad right now. We have a lot on the books and we're still trying to process.
Did you guys get vaccinated?
You got both shots at this good.
I have it. It was something to do for me.
That's
You know,
good.
it's
That's good.
So I don't like to replace it after the thing. So we just live through it.
But that's good.
That's good.
We have compromised the municipality.
Oh, yeah.
We've been
So
talking-
does Klein.
So there's some, there's.
Oh, no, that's.
We're right in public all the time.
I never thought about it. So I'm not one of those. It's easy to do what you need to do. Thanks for to say hi.
Oh, good.
It's good to see you.
Yeah, I wish it was me.
Weather.
I know. I kept thinking he was going to kill us.
I was in social
I
media.
know. It's like, well, he's dying, so that's good. Anyway, okay. Okay, you're
Good talking to you. Good seeing you again.
All right, we're good. Oh, there we go. All right, that was a quick break. If I could get the panelists to come up. We'll try and get everybody out of here by 8:30, so we're not spending much time. So the type of format that this is in is actually created by a gentleman named Bob Chadwick that was the Siskiyou National Forest Supervisor back in the 80s and 90s when they had so much trouble with the spotted owls and people were chaining themselves to the trees. And he felt that there was a better way to communicate and go forward. So these questions are developed right out of his years of doing conflict resolution. Not that we have a conflict here, but it's a real good way to build on natural resources. And I was lucky enough to travel around with Bob to Malta, Montana, and down to Arizona and to Columbia, and see how he worked through problems. And I was also fortunate enough to live in a place called Manhow Valley up in northern Washington that had made a goal to get salmon back to the headwaters of the Columbia. And Manhow Valley is about 40 miles from the Canadian border. And while I was living in Twisp and Winthrop area, the first salmon returned to the Manhow River. And it took probably 20 years of collaboration and people working together to get to that point. And as we've heard tonight, Lakeview has a great foundation of working together, and we have many good people working to move forward, and it's good to have dialogues like this. And maybe someday we'll have a goal like getting the salmon back to here, but our own specialized goal, and we'll see it happen. So, when Nick Johnson and I sat down, there's chairs. Where's my chairs, right? When we sat down, this panel was mostly going to be about forest and community, but so much of Lake County is rangeland, and so this panel is sustainability, present and future, and all the people on the stage here have really worked on rangelands and in some of the private rangelands to make a huge difference. And so, because Lake County is such a diverse biome and has forests and deserts and all sorts of different components that make it up, it'd be sort of, I thought if we were going to talk about natural resources, just stopping at forest would be a little bit short of everything that's getting accomplished on the natural resource front. And so we'll just start again, like we did with the first panel, and if you guys could just introduce yourselves and how you live Black County.
My name is James and I'm an alcoholic. My name is James Williams. I'm a Lake County Commissioner. I was born and raised in Summer Lake, Oregon. And I love Lake County for a multitude of reasons. I've been all over this country. I lived and worked in Sacramento. I've worked in Texas and traveled the country. I've traveled outside and abroad to Europe, spent time in Norway, Sweden, the Czech Republic, and when I married my wife, who was born and raised in Sweden, we were trying to decide what our life was going to look like as we wanted to raise a family. And I was very lucky that my wife loved Lake County. When I brought her here and I gave her the full disclosure, this is where I'm from, this is my family, what do you think? And I was very grateful, because you either love it or you hate it. And I got lucky, and I struck gold. And we decided this was the best place in the world to raise a family. And so here we stay, and here we plan on staying for the rest of our lives. The things I love about the county isn't just in terms of natural resources and the beauty that we have, the natural beauty that I think many times we take for granted, but also the people. Because, and to me, the people have been the richest asset that I could ever quantify. So, that's all I got.
Good evening, I'm Farah Burmer, and my family and I live in Paisley, private consultant contractor formerly with Oregon State University. And we moved here, so Lake County is a really nice surprise for me because I didn't know anything about it. And so accepted a job with Oregon State University, moved here from North Dakota with my family. We had just adopted, my husband and I, 2 young, beautiful girls, 7 and 8 years old, and really wanted to be closer to his family that lives in Prineville. So so the choices were either working in Burns or Lakeview. And so we chose Lakeview, and it was the right choice. So what do I love about it? It's I just love the heart of the county. I think the people, the ranching community, the cattle industry I've lived and worked in for most of my life, so I'm comfortable with that. The scenery, the landscape, there's just so many pieces. It's a lovely place.
I'm Cody Hamilton. I'm a soil conservationist with the Natural Resources Conservation Service. My family was lucky enough to move here when I was really young, and I went up through the school system here. Went off to college at Oregon State, and of quickly found out that the suburban life was not for me. It's a hard thing to put into words why you love something, but I think one reason I love this area is the lack of people and the natural values that we have and just a sense of community here.
I'm terrible at public speaking. My name is Mary Woodward. I, along with my family, ranch in Adel. We have for generations, and now it's my turn to take care of the resource as I raise my family. I'm not crying, it's just what my voice does, so Mary. I traveled for school and work for a while and chose to move back to Lake County and take my turn at the ranch, partly for the sense of community that's not only in Warner Valley, but the entire county. And I'm not crying.
My name is Jose, I go by Joe, if you've run it, and I'm not gonna cry. I manage the J. Spear Ranch Company in Paisley, Oregon. And Richard, what was the other question? I was actually raised with Richard, Mary. I grew up on their place. So I am from Lake County. I actually worked all over the state of Oregon, all the way from Blythe to Grant County, Harney County, all over. Anyhow, so what was the second question?
What do you love about Lake County?
Oh, I love everything about Lake County. That's why I moved back home. I love everything about Lake County. You know, the desert, the timber, everything. I think there's just a lot of stuff that we need to get fixed, like ASAP. And by the way, I am sitting on the wrong panel, to be honest with you. Here you
You almost hit it on the other panel. So yeah, let's talk about what needs to get fixed. What's the worst possible outcomes from a rangeland perspective that we need to deal with in Lake County?
Rangeland perspective, worst possible outcome. The last panel spoke mainly about forests, so we're going to focus on rangeland. Okay. I think, I kind of thought about this a little bit when we were talking on when the folks were talking on the previous panel. I think the worst possible outcome also applies to this, where we are unable to learn from the mistakes and bring the message of success and our successes back to state and federal legislators and to implement good policy changes. I think that the worst possible outcome is when we are unable to adapt to the changes that are ahead of us. I'm from a younger generation that I'm not trying to hold on to too many things from the past, I would say. And that was something that I was kind of picking up on the previous panel. I don't really have that perspective. And I'm thinking more for the future and what that's actually going to hold. And I don't want to dispense with the amazing things that have been done by past generations. But I also want to take into account the fact that we are, although a big county of 8,000 square miles, 8,000 souls, we are a speck in the grand scheme of things in a nation of 50 states, one of the most diverse nations in the world. And we have so many different biomes, as Rich pointed out, just here in our county. And when we talk about forming policy that's going to dictate what we do on our rangeland, what we do on our farmland, what it actually looks like, what good treatments are, what good practices are for our soils, our farms, that is an ever-evolving process that changes with the time. And we need to be able to adapt and to be nimble And the worst possible outcome from my perspective, is that we don't learn from the past, and that we're not able to adapt for the future.
Okay, so sometimes it's good to be an outsider to come in and kind of look in, and I see a lot of change happening like fast on the landscape. And so worst possible outcomes, obviously fire is a huge player, and it's devastating here. So fire has destroyed not just the forest but the range. Just up from our place at Jay's Spirit Ground there, it was a beautiful range. And just prime, and it's gone. It's gone. Sagebrush, all of it. Forbs, gone. So there's habitat for you. It's been wiped out. And then the other worst possible outcome is the invasive grasses. So I worked a lot with that when I was with the university, and they were coming on strong. So things are really changing. It's not like business as usual, kind of like what you said, James. It's a new game, and I think that we have to adapt and use those resources wisely. And they're different resources now. The invasive grasses, we can treat them, they're still gonna be there. How can we start maybe grazing them, using them more as a grazing resource, managing them. California already does that. They're mostly annual grasses there. We have a mix here, but it's shifting, especially when you add fire into the landscape and some of the climate effects we're seeing, shorter winters, longer warm periods, things like that. So I guess as far as the worst possible outcomes is that we do nothing. We just stand there, and fire continues to beat up the landscape, and invasive grasses continue to come in. So.
When I think about worst possible outcomes on rangeland, and I guess just private ag lands in general, and ag lands overall, I automatically think of all of these natural resource issues that we face: the annual grasses, erosion, fire. But then I kind of look at the bigger picture. I was in a meeting last week with an organization that did some research into some family ranches in fire that had fire come through their properties, and almost none of those ranches were there when more than one fire came through in a generation. And I think of, if we are unable to keep family ranches on the landscape, that's scary for me, because we don't only lose these local people to manage the lands, we lose a huge part of our economic equation for our county. So that's the scariest part for me.
So I think what I have is along the same lines as Cody. I think that if we don't learn from the history of the last few decades of preservation, not only through policy and litigation, and if we can't adapt to more adaptive management and conservation in order to sustain the landscapes, none of us are going to be here.
Well, I agree with both of you guys. Worst possible outcome. I think we proved it this year. Yes, it's forest, but it's still range ground. Worst, by not doing anything, we proved what happens. That's exactly what happens. It's mismanagement. It starts at the local level. It starts up high and then works its way down. Yes, I understand everybody's got their hands tied, but things got to change. And those that work for the federal government, and I guess maybe I probably shouldn't even go down that path. I didn't even go there. We need to, and not talk about it, Richard. So this is what it is. All this is talk, okay? I've sat in meetings here, when I first took over the district 15 years ago, okay, in meetings, I said, you guys are gonna be writing, books when a fire does break out. It took, quite a few years longer than I thought, honestly. We're here, okay, it happened. So, in my opinion, up there where we, have our permits and stuff, where I've seen zero Forest Service activity, zero, nothing happening. You know, we can, swinging, that's where it needs to go. I won't go negative. We just need to get to, get back to the basics and get to doing some shit. You know, that's what needs to happen. We need to get to work, and now. I'll talk about it, get to work. And a lot of these guys that work for the agencies, they might need, you know, they need to have more stake in the game. Because if they have more stake in the game, I think they're gonna be a little bit more proactive to do stuff. You know, if they know that their livelihood, or they're not gonna be able to get a check because a piece of ground burns, you watch out. You watch. Your fire probably out. You know, I'm just guessing. You know, but if their livelihood's at stake, and they know they're not going to be able to feed their family, I'll guarantee you they'll do everything they can to put that fire out. You know, and here we go back to fires, just because the last few years that's what's been happening. But it's all the same. All places are the same. So anyhow, I'm done.
So, let's talk about the best possible outcome, management of natural resources. And a lot of you guys are on this panel because you've been proactive in accomplishing that, and you've seen the outcomes that are possible. And I think that we can look out and see even more outcomes.
So, best possible outcome. I'm going to tell a quick story. Try and make it quick. As I mentioned in my opening, that my wife was from Sweden, and one of the things that I got from my father-in-law, he's a little bit of a history buff. He was telling me a story about years ago in Sweden, back when Sweden controlled much of what is now Scandinavia. And they had one of the largest navies in the world, and they built all their navies with wood at that time, mainly oak. And as we know, oak takes a long time to grow. As I worked at the lumber mill, I was a lumber grader, and all the codes that we use to grade lumber to this day were written by a Swedish guy back in Sweden many years ago. We still use those same codes for structural lumber to this day to build every house in America and the world. Or at least in most of the Western world. There was a couple Swedish boat builders at the time, and some lumber guys that got together and they decided they saw some serious things happening with their natural resources in Sweden. And they went to the king and they said, hey, we've got to do something because our oak forests are failing. We need to have a plan for the future. It needs to be sustainable. And the Swedish king went about setting into place one of the first national forestry departments in history. And many years later, in 1997, I believe it was, the head of that department, still in existence, went to the Swedish king. And his charge and his role was to preserve the oak forests. And of course, this is many years later, 400, 300 and some odd years later to be exact. Went to the Swedish king and said the forest is now ready for harvest. Of course, they don't ever build their navy anymore with oak. But as a result, they have one of the largest reserves of oak timber in the world, of straight timber that can be used for a multitude of purposes. That took a degree of foresight that I think that we need to take into account. We've talked about the lessons learned from the last 2 decades. What about the lessons learned from the last 100 years? The best case scenario is that we learn from all the things in the past and that we are able to implement good change and have a plan that goes well beyond not just the cycle of an election cycle or or even our lifetimes, but leaving something there for our grandchildren that is actually going to continue. I think some of the good things that we've seen, and I appreciate the comments, Joe, on the fact that we gotta stay away from just talk. That we actually have to do something. I think the good things, the best possible outcome are the things that we're seeing right now. We are aware of some very serious issues. I would say that we've even been lackadaisical to a certain extent, which is what has allowed our forests to get to the position we are. I'm not saying we in this room, I'm not saying we are our partners and agencies within the county. I'm saying we as a nation, our politicians in Washington, our state, we need to take further action and not just talk. And as a result of inaction, we have seen some very drastic forest fires. As a result of the changing of times, sometimes it's not even just human problem, it's just extreme weather. Too much fuels on the forests that we're not taking care of, too much fuels on the landscape that we're not taking care of and managing, natural fire lines and everything else. And it's not even just a fire issue. It's a method of being able to graze properly, of being able to have a good plan for our annual grasses coming in. And so those are just some of the things that I think is best possible outcome is that we continue to have discussions like this, but also take action. We have RFPAs now in this county that we didn't have until we started to see some of the things happen. Now we have a multitude of people, of civilians, that took action and are able to fill a role in initial attack that we didn't have before. And they primarily operate in rangeland. And we're able to use them. We're able to be partners in that as a result of the things that are happening. Yes, they're bad. Yes, some of the fire that we've seen is horrendous. The impacts have been horrible. But there's some amazing things that have come out of that too. So I just want to make sure that we're recognizing that the fact that I personally think that we're on a really good path to having really good success because of the awareness that we've noticed of some of these issues.
I was really tuning in, should have been thinking more about my answer. Okay, positive outcome. I think it's a great time to be creative and think of new solutions. I really do. There's landscapes that will never be the same. I don't know as much about, I don't know about forests, but the range certainly. There's sagebrush that won't come back for decades, and who knows if it will. There's some forbs that, very questionable if they'll come back, grasses. So I think it's a really good time to be proactive and start seeding things, maybe newer things, maybe newer cultivars, for example, that can produce better quality, quantity. I'm talking grazing now. I also want to bring up something that is on a much larger scale than Lake County, but you hear a lot of talk now about carbon and carbon losses, carbon sinks. I just want to ask this question, is how much carbon loss is there from these catastrophic wildfires? That is, I think, going to be a really important topic moving forward. I think the livestock industry has been targeted for some of those carbon losses, but when you really look at it, these catastrophic forest fires, I want to ask, how much carbon are we losing from this? And I think it's going to surprise everybody when they come out with those type of figures. I also think there's a lot of AUMs that have been lost on the forest and on range. So these are things I think we have to start being a little bit more technical maybe moving forward. Being a little bit more proactive moving forward, asking these kinds of questions, and then the opportunities to mitigate those things, like can we use these landscapes as carbon sinks now, where we start replanting? I believe the answer is yes. And then, how do we capture more AUMs than previous by seeding things that perhaps produce better quality quantity? So I think the opportunities are really positive moving forward, but they're totally different. Because I mean, there's trees that are gonna take hundreds of years to come back. And there's landscapes that are probably not gonna be the same for a long time, or maybe ever.
Yeah, I'm just kind of gonna go off of that a little bit. I'm lucky enough where I get to work with a lot of great private land owners and producers. I think best case scenario for me moving forward would be helping these folks increase profit margins, figuring out how to make their lands and their allotments more resilient and sustainable to the changing climate, if you want to call it. And in a little bit, I think that we are living in the good old days of work getting done. You hear a lot of people say collaboration, collaboration, collaboration. Well, that's how the money comes in. It really does put Lake County far above everywhere else. And you look to our neighbors to the west in the Klamath Basin, and sometimes it makes you think that maybe we are pretty fortunate.
I'd say my best outcome on a rangeland level or a federal land level would something closer to local management, adaptive management, so that we're no longer tied by policies set in DC or Portland or wherever, that the local scientists at the local level can look at the ground, look at the current conditions for that year, and set time and duration of grazing so that we can improve the landscape and use it as a regenerative tool.
I 100% agree, and that's kind of one of the ones I was going to say too. And same with the lands with wilderness characteristics. That's got to go bye-bye. That just, it's just wrong with what they're trying to do. But anyhow, I agree with Mary, and I'll just keep it short.
We'll just, move along pretty good, so we'll stick to the script. What are some strategies and actions what are the, like Jose says, Joe says, I can't help it. What are some stuff that we as a community can go out tomorrow and actually start doing?
I think getting involved is we as a community need to be involved in the process. I'll give an example. Commissioner Schulenberger and Commissioner Albertson and I, we were kind of surprised at this. I hope I get this story accurate. Recently there was a debate about hunting or dispatching, controlling the population of mountain lions in the Warner Valley because they were seeing bighorn sheep getting decimated, largely by the mountain lions. So there was a comment period for people to give comment on what they wanted to see done as far as managing the mountain lion numbers, because we have an awful lot of them in this state, and they can take down a deer a week. And so during that comment period, I think there was like 360 some odd letters that were submitted as comment. There were only 3 letters, maybe even 2, I can't quite remember, that were submitted from anyone within Lake County that actually lived here. That was the Lake County Board of Commissioners, and I believe one resident, or even it may have actually been Hart Mountain, U.S. Department of Fish and Wildlife, saying that we needed to manage the mountain lion numbers. Every other letter said, don't hurt a kitty cat. And that is because we did not have any public involvement in the process. We did not have enough public from our county, the people that live here, the people that know the land. Things that the public can do right now is to get involved in the process and know when these things are actually happening and to make sure your voices are heard. I think the overall culture of my county, and it's one of the greatest things about it. It's what I love about it. It's why I love being able to go back to Summer Lake, where the biggest thing we fight about is who grew the biggest pumpkin this year. The silent majority is exactly that, silent. And there is a time for us to be silent. Mind our own business, to live our lives, to raise our families, and not to be making waves constantly because it creates volatility in the community and in the homes that we call our own. But there is also a time to make our voices heard. And so I believe what we can do now as a community right now, going forward, is to get involved, be part of it. You have 3 commissioners, you have many other agency members and agencies within Lake County that I think honestly would love to hear input from the public on some of these things. I think it would be great for us as commissioners. I'm just speaking as a commissioner because that's the lens that I bring to this panel. We love to hear from the public and we love to hear input because we don't have all the answers, and I think many times we as local leaders get pulled in 100 different directions all at once. And I don't know if that was Commissioner Schoenberger snickering in the back or not, but I think it's true. So I think it's really good to hear from the public, to hear back from people in the community, to keep us on track with what actually should be priorities for our county as a whole. That's what I'm thinking.
Yes, people involvement, and then just what Mary said, you know, the people on the land should be really directing a lot of the decision making. They're closest to the land. I mean, it's just 1 + 1 = 2. It makes absolute sense in that their ideas are heard, you know, and even embraced, you know, by some of the public land agencies. And I really see that struggle in this county and actually all through Oregon, the western states. I mean, the public-private sort of battle. But I think that the private landowners that run on those allotments know them intimately. I mean, they're, you know, and so they really need to be driving the ship in a lot of ways. And yeah, I mean, working hand in hand in partners, but not just being told what to do, but you know, working with partners.
Yeah, go out and find an organization that supports your beliefs. Get behind them, help them lobby for you, write your elected officials. Heck, write your non-elected officials, write the officials on the west side of the state too, why not? They write ours. Just, you know, squeaky wheel gets the grease, right? And just keep making noise.
I guess I echo what the rest of the panelists have said in that we have to get involved. It is easy to, even for us, to stay on our ranches and do the day-to-day operations and keep taking each step forward. But really, I think in order for change to happen, we have to get involved, be part of panels like this, where we talk to others, be part of collaboratives, which make good use of dollars that they want spent on the ground. And the other thing is to stay involved and be vocal so that things like the River Democracy Act don't pass, which will just preserve more ground instead of actually letting us conserve and manage it.
I 100% agree.
Whoa.
Moving along.
So before we get to the grandparents' question, I want to get you guys' temperature on, we're sort of living a different, every generation says this, but we live in a different type of climate, different type of culture. It seems that there's a push to sort of distance ourselves from a past culture to make a positive change. I don't know if I'm on board with that, but that's what I've heard throughout the night. I'm open to it. But I wonder if culturally in Lake County, we might, how do you say this, very polite group of people. I wonder, he's candid's good. Wonder if you guys see a room for healthy conflict to make a good change in the future.
I don't think we know how to have conflict. I think, I'm speaking for my generation, and my concern for the next generation is how to have healthy conflict, dialogue, and having a meaningful dialectic on positions that we disagree with, and being okay with having that disagreement, but still being able to do something constructive. The next generation is going to be passed the torch at some point. The one after mine, and the one after that. And they have to, I'm very concerned about the tools that we're leaving behind for them to be able to pull apart and dissect many of these issues. I think, Rich, I'm going to ask you to kind of expound a little bit, though, on that as far as what exact cultural concerns are you speaking of when you talk about having conflict? What is it? Can you expound on that a little bit? I think not just for myself, but the other panelists.
I just, over in being out and around, private industry solves issues much different than public industry, or public sector. And I call it healthy conflict. In the oil field, we have healthy conflict. And part of the reason why, or even in ranching, part of the reason why those industries are so strong is because you can state your opinion, you can be candid, and people push back, but at the end of the day, you have this give and take, and it actually produces a great product. And I feel like that would be naturally what our county's default setting is. But I feel that, I think that's what rural America's default setting is. But I don't think that's what a lot of people that are making decisions in our scope or sphere, I don't think that's their default setting. I was wondering if we could leverage that and preserve it for the betterment of natural resources.
I'll see what I can do with that really quick, and I'll pass this down the line. I do think that we have an issue with the way we relate and the issues of today. Social media, for example, is a serious problem, in my opinion. It is a tool that can be used, but at the same time, social media is a huge headache, and I think that we make decisions too quickly. We move at a faster pace than we have ever moved in the history of mankind before, period. And the way I can say that to prove that is the reality is, I mean, if you can actually have a governor, a president, a leader of a nation that can have a thought on his way through to the office in the morning, and he can relate that to an entire nation within a second, if the nation's watching, and typically they are. 100 years ago, you know, if I had a complex issue going on in the state or in our culture, in our society, in our nation, I had to take a piece of paper and write that out, and then I had to hand that to someone on a horse that would have to ride across an entire state to relay that to a legislature that in the past didn't meet every year. We are moving at a faster pace where we can make snap decisions, policy that affects so many people with a text message. Thought about it? Nope, don't like that. Boom. You might change your mind tomorrow morning. You might sleep on that. You might have a change of heart. You might think about this, pray about it with the Lord, and say, you know what? Actually, that's just my vanity. Or maybe that's just, some other bias. We're not able to take the time to evaluate good direction for our society and to have the time to have dialogue with our neighbors, to have dialogue with the other agencies, the people that have been put in charge. Many of these people within these agencies are forest supervisors, are BLM supervisors, are residents of our community. They're people that live here. They love this place just as much as we do. They want to live here the rest of their lives. Their children go to our schools. And they want to have a future here too. And so I think that we know that everyone cares. It's a matter of taking the time to listen to the other side and to try and find a path forward once we listen and have time to unpack that issue.
I think healthy conflict is great. I advocate for it. I think in the absence of that, you just become stale. And it's the art of debate. It's what you learn in FFA. It's having an opinion, and factually backing that up. We really, we get our girls to question things, or I'll get them to question, because you're right, James, it's social media, it's like just swallow whatever you're told, and it's like, why? No, just because Google says it doesn't mean it's real, it's a fact. So we get them to question a lot, and I think I hope more kids can do that in their generation, because I think a lot of them are kind of just numbing out. But I think healthy conflict is great, it's necessary, it gets things dynamic, moving, and it gets solutions out of the mix.
Yeah, I think a little bit maybe where you come from, Rich, is you don't necessarily want to see the community change. You want to see that community that you grew up in, and you want that for the next generation. And while part of me is right there with you, I would love to see that. I think about what it must have been like, growing up here in the 60s or something, when this place was playing movies every weekend, and how awesome that would have been. But I also think that a lot of people think that change is weird, but I think that it'd be weird if it didn't change. Change is constant. We just have to figure out how to change with it. And I think being a rural community puts us at a little bit of a disadvantage. We have an aging median age in the community. And just like the two before me have said, social media is so big today, and technology. And while I don't necessarily like it or want to see it come, I do believe it is a necessary evil.
So I think healthy conflict is good, and if you know me, you know I hate all conflict most of the time, so saying that is pretty impressive. I think one of the problems is that, so say we're sitting at a meeting with local people, and we have a conflict, and we can debate it, but once again, they don't have the authority to make the changes, even at one or two steps above them, even in the town, they don't have the authority to make the changes. You can convince them, but then what are you doing? So yes, healthy conflict is important. Unfortunately, too often the people that can make true change aren't in the room with having that conflict.
I agree again, but here we go. Healthy conflict is good. okay? And just what Mary said, in with what you said, somebody has to be held accountable, okay? And where's it at? Like in the BLM, it's the higher enforcement, it's a higher, somebody at the local level needs to be held accountable. I'm accountable, you're accountable, you know, all the way on down the line. You're accountable, everybody's accountable, okay? But who puts their foot down and, you know, the shit stops with them? And that's where it's accountability. We need to get down at the local level, then that way they can make the decisions with what they say goes, you know, because the problem is, right now, you can debate, you can have conflict with these people, but, you know, we never talk to the higher ups at all. You know, we just take their word for it, you know, well, we don't have time to continue on. So that's what I think. I agree with them, and then accountability.
Thanks for indulging me on that little tangent.
Oh.
No. Anyways, so the future question. Say we haven't really said what the goal we want to accomplish is, but we have a rough, loose idea of what it is. So when you're with your grandkids in the future, what do you think it's going to look like?
What I think it's going to look like, and what I hope it looks like, aren't necessarily the same thing. And I know that may be very pessimistic of me to say, but I'm just not an optimist. I'm a realist, and I'm looking at the full set of cards before us, and all the things that we've talked about today, and the perspectives on this panel, and the panel that went before us. What I would like to see is local discretion. And I think, Joe, you hit the nail right on the head there. I think I would like to see more local decision-making authority and power. So that when we see mistakes being made, or when we see good things that we could do, potential, I'll just say, maybe I'll just keep this positive and I'll also say potential. We need to articulate that somehow. We need to relate it. And the best way for us to do that in a very remote frontier county is to find that person that we can speak to and relate the message personally. And not wait for it to get all the way up through in a letter to legislatures and then back to DC and be completely distorted by the time it gets there. I was recently working on a bill completely unrelated to this subject, but we were trying to navigate how we were going to write it. We got to a point, and I had like 12 other commissioners on this group and from different counties across Eastern Oregon, and we said, okay, it's at a place, we like it. Looks good, right? Can we all support it? And I had to say it. I said, well, I like the way it looks now, but I don't know what it's going to look like by the time the legislature gets done with it and it comes out on the other end. I don't know if I will support it then, so I can't do it. So when we relate messages on the potential for opportunity and everything else, what I would like to see is our agency reps, our people at a local level, who are actually the boots on the ground, the people implementing the fire. Like Commissioner Schulenberger had a long history in a career of putting that fire line down, and he had a passion for seeing what the effects were going into the future. Years after that, seeing the grasses come back, and the annual grasses, the right type of grasses, then that be native grasses, and what the landscape looked like after that. That cannot be relayed to a politician in DC who has never been here. It just can't. When we try, the Lord knows we try. So what I would like to see is that local discretionary authority over the multitude of biomes that we have the best understanding of. What I think we will see, or my grandchildren will see, honestly, if I can hold back my pessimistic nature, I think we will see somewhere in between, hopefully, somewhere further down that line, don't think I'll see what I would wish for and hope for. And that can only be accomplished if we continue to keep pushing on these issues and keep talking about it. It was relayed on the last panel and by Barry and Muir. We saw success in implementing good fire on the landscape, prescribed fire, and appropriate thinning. We saw the fire less drastically affecting those areas where those trees have a chance of survival, where that landscape will have a chance of survival, rather than cooking the soils beyond repair, or at least extending their repair life of, maybe 20 years before we'll see something grow there again. And when we talk about grazing and being able to put cows back on the landscape, to treat the landscape with cows and with livestock, drastic fire changes that future outlook. So we have to, I would hope that we can see good practices implemented because of the perspective brought at the local level.
I hope to see for Lake County that generational ranges continue, like Justin said in the previous panel, to the 6th, 7th, 8th, 10th generation, and that the natural resources will continue to thrive. I don't think it's going to look like it has been. It doesn't even now. If you look at historic pictures of forests and range, it's changed dramatically from, even 100 years ago. So I don't think it'll look the same, but I hope that the agricultural sector continues to thrive and the natural resources continue to thrive here.
Yeah, with James talking about being a pessimist, I was told by a rancher the other day that the only difference between a pessimist and an optimist is a pessimist has experience. So, now going off a little bit of what Laura said and what I touched on earlier, I think success for me would be seeing these family operations continue to operate in a successful manner within the community, and not having large corporations come in and buy them out, or solar farms, or being run out of the country by fire, whatever threat it may be. That would be a success for me if I can look back and my grandkids could talk with the grandkids of the producers today, and they're still here running those family operations. And then another success would be having healthy populations of wildlife on the land and healthy natural resources overall, whatever that may look like in the future, as long as we can manage it sustainably and keep moving forward.
So I'm going to echo a lot of the same things. Success for me would be the ranch being a viable enough business economically and natural resource wise that my grandchildren want to come back and take their turn. So yeah, that's what I hope.
What was the question? Richard, what was the question? The grandkids, and then if we get off on this success stuff? So, Richard.
Like, where do you see the future?
Well, I see this is where I see the future. Okay, this is just in the Paisley area. I see the Paisley grasslands, okay, in the future. I see more wildfires if we continue going the way that we're going. I hope that's not the case, but, and I say that, and I'm just being a smart ass. So I manage the J. Spear Ranch. I manage for cattle, wildlife, and timber. And the cattle and the wildlife are going to continue. The timber, not so much. All of our timber has been burnt. Okay. What I see, what I want to see is with this restoration stuff that I'm working with the Oregon Department of Forestry here. To replant, get all that going. That's what I want to see. I want to see all that, and I want to have my grandkids take them and show them that we plant those trees in the future. That's going to be success. So on the same stuff like you guys
That's it.
I don't know if, oh, mine's gonna work. I didn't know if it was gonna work. So, then something dawned on me while we were having the conversation. There's not many people here, but I think the conversation that we had amongst ourselves and the people who were here in the audience and the people that were on the panels, I think that was extremely important. I hope everybody got something out of it. You know, I would have liked to see more people here, but I really do feel like this was sort of a successful conversation.
Keep it going.
Yeah, well, I want to thank the panelists for this panel and sort of wrap things up, but I came over here to see if you would honor, introduce yourself, tell us why you love Lake County and honor panelists.
I like Lake County. Probably I'm on the edge of loving it, but like it too serious. Okay, but I like it because it has enough spunk to have an activity like this where we can talk about looking after our homeland. And I honor you all for showing and expressing that love of this place.
Yeah.
Anyways, I was trying to find a panelist here, but I'll just do it. And I want to honor everybody that came and stayed for the entire time and listened. And I hope that you take some value out of it. And we really appreciate you sticking it out. And thank you.
But let's do it again.
That will call it good.
Keep it going.